I could not leave her for more than 45 minutes. She would just scream. I had to physically be in the house, and she was either there or she was in the jolly jumper. So I was like trying to type and write my thesis while she's just like bouncing up and down in the doorway next to me, like, hi, Mom.
Why do you parent like that?
Hello, welcome to Why Do You Parent Like That? My name is Abby Harrison, and it is a joy to have you here. Firstly, the boring stuff out of the way. Please rate, review, subscribe, share, do the Macarena, all the things. Secondly, this episode is sponsored by the babes over at Viva La Vulva, so thank you so much to them for their support. Viva La Vulva actually absolutely saved me postpartum both times. I bought their perennial power pack, which is quite a tongue twister. Say that 5 times fast. I bought it before I gave birth to Freddie, and then I rebought it again before Max because they were just so good and so helpful. The products were amazing, particularly the Healing Perennial Spray and the Good Witch Hazel. Those two things I just used and used and used and used until I was healed, and I think they made all the difference for me. They just absolutely saved me. I really love what Viva La Vulva stand for. I love their business. I love that they're taking the stigma out of looking after our vulvas after giving birth because, let's be honest, they go through serious stuff when we give birth. It's not easy. And they also have products for all modes of birth. They aren't only focused on physiological birth, which is great. I also just love their commitment to education and awareness and support resources for postpartum parents. And actually, in fact, our guest today is one of the experts in their tribe of experts, which is very cool. And of course, they want to give you guys some love. So if you use code VIVAMAMA, VIVAMAMA, you will get 20% off when you spend over $50. So go and show Viva La Vulva some love. Their Instagram and their website is linked in the show notes. Thank you, Viva La Vulva. My genitals are forever grateful for you and your products. Thirdly, some big, ginormous, huge, gargantuan news from me is that Why Do You Parent Like That is now officially on the iHeartRadio podcast network. So if you hear some ads throughout this episode, that is why. I am just so excited to be a part of the iHeart whānau, and this really feels like the start of some exciting growth for the pod. I have written a Substack post more about this change and this decision and what it's going to look like, so if you want more information, you can check that out in the show notes. But the long and short of it is basically that nothing on your end is changing other than you're going to start to hear some ads play throughout the episode, but I am getting a lot more support and a lot more opportunity for growth, and I've just been linking up with some very smart people who believe in this idea and want to get behind me, which is so awesome. And I'm really, really excited for this journey. And thank you guys for being such engaged listeners. It means they took notice of me and wanted to work with me. So thank you. I think that's all the housekeeping out of the way. The episode today is with Charlotte Bruce Kells, aka PHDMAMANZxWDYPLT. We've realised what happens when two absolute nerds have a conversation is that we talk for 2 hours instead of 1. Realistically, I could have spent all night picking Charlotte's brain about her incredible PhD research. This conversation was just so good and so valuable that I actually didn't want to cut any of it. So what that means is that this week and next week are both going to be episodes with Charlotte. I actually just couldn't deal with the idea of you guys missing out on the good stuff by me trying to fit it all into one episode. So this week is Charlotte's answers to the first 2 questions, and next week will be her answers to the second 2 questions. And honestly, that's great news for you guys because double the Charlotte means double the great listening. And I think that's all from me, so enjoy the Charlotte episode. Love you! Say it back.
Why do you parent like that?
Today's guest is someone who has spent the last few years deep in the research of something many of us experience, but few of us are ever really prepared for, becoming a mother for the first time. Charlotte Bruce Kells, also known online as @PHDMAMANZ, is in the final stretch of her PhD in Sociology and Gender Studies at the University of Otago, where she's been examining how first-time mothers make sense of their new identity in a world that still doesn't quite know how to hold them. Charlotte didn't come to this work from a distance, came to it through lived experience. It was after the birth of her first daughter that she began to notice how little had changed for new mothers over the decades, how persistent the same old challenges were, and how much of the real stuff, loneliness, overwhelm, rage, joy, grief, was still happening quietly behind closed doors. So she decided to study it, to document it, and later to share it. While on maternity leave with her second baby, Charlotte started an Instagram account called PHDMAMANZ. It began as a space to share her research with fellow parents, but quickly evolved into something messier and more honest. Part diary, part breakdown, part academic journal, part love letter to the weird, hard, beautiful experience of parenting small people. Her community grew fast, drawn to her raw posts about postpartum depression, political rants, and the occasional update on how her thesis was going, or not going. She's a mother to Edie and Imogen, aka Ginny, and a thoughtful, brave voice in the often chaotic world of parenting and social media. Charlotte Bruce Kells, welcome to Why Do You Parent Like That?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. That was like an amazing introduction. I need to steal that for whenever somebody asks for an author bio. I had to write one the other day for a book chapter I have forthcoming, and I was like, what do I say about myself? So maybe I'll just steal
It's
that
so
from
hard.
you. Just
Absolutely.
plagiarize
I
it.
always say I love creative writing, and I get people to send me stuff about them, and usually, like you did, they'll send me just the facts about themselves, and then I have to take what they've given me and then scroll their Instagram and look at their history and see what I've seen other people say about them and look at comments. I feel like a bit of a detective putting all these things together and then adding what I know of people. It's like so much fun writing these little intros for people.
You're very good at it, and it's a beautiful
Thank you.
skill. So I'm
Thank
very
you.
impressed.
Thank you. And I'd like to point out, because someone was like, that's totally ChatGPT. There is no ChatGPT involved in my intro writing. Thank you so much.
Did someone say that to you?
Yes.
I mark essays with ChatGPT in them all the time at uni, and that wasn't ChatGPT. That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. I was so offended. I was like, no, my guests deserve better
Rude.
than ChatGPT. I did a postgrad diploma just as ChatGPT became a thing. It was like 2023. And so like as I was at Massey Uni, they were like just introducing all of their rules about ChatGPT. And so now I'm like quite scared of it. I'm like,
Yeah.
in my head, I'm still convinced I'm going to get marked down or like done for plagiarism.
Everyone, I know it's wild, and it's just I've started like tutoring and teaching at the university in 2021, and like the shift over the last few years has been crazy with
I bet.
ChatGPT. Like we have to completely rethink how we're teaching and the assignments that we're doing and
It's
everything.
so hard.
It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. Okay, well, to start off, how about you just introduce yourself and like a little bit of a summary about who you are and what you do as if someone hadn't met you before on the internet.
Okay, well, I'm Charlotte, as you said, and yes, mum to two little girls, Imogen and Edie. Imogen is almost 5, she'll be 5 next month, and then Edie will be 3 in July. And as you said, I am doing my PhD at the moment. I'm very much a professional student, so have never gone out and had a career and a proper job, but I suppose like academics is my career now.
Yeah, that's a proper job. That's a proper job.
Yeah. But yeah, just started university at 18 in what would it have been 2014, and I did my first year at Vic because I'm from Wellington. Stayed there, then decided to go and do the rest of my degree down in Otago because I wanted a bit of a change, and I thought I'd be there for like 2 or 3 years to finish off my undergrad. And this year marks 10 years that I've been down here, so I just never left. So yeah, finished my undergrad in English literature and a minor in moral and political thought. And through that minor, I did politics papers and I also did gender studies papers. Fell in love with gender studies. So then as I was doing my BA, I also like concurrently did a dip grad in gender studies so that I could go on to do my honours dissertation in gender studies. Graduated from that, went straight on to my master's. And master's was the start of 2019. And I was 23 and I was like, okay. So it was like around the time Jacinda Ardern was Prime Minister. She'd had her daughter the year before. And I was like, wow, as a 23-year-old young woman who like wants to have kids one day and also have an academic career, like I'm really interested in this like idea of a Prime Minister who has also had a baby while in office.
Yeah.
But was very much interested in it as somebody who, like in a piece I wrote about it, like I call myself an interested outsider to the research in terms of like my positionality. And that I was just like, this is fascinating. I thought kids were like 10 years down the track for me, you know, thinking like early 30s would probably start thinking about having a baby. I had been with my partner for 2 years at this point. And we talked about all of that, kind of planned all of that. And then halfway through or a few months into my master's, I found out I was expecting Imogen. And she was a very, very big surprise.
Yeah.
So yeah, big shock. big surprise. And so then I say that I went from being like an interested outsider to an overly emotionally invested insider to the research. So I found myself kind of reading this very dense feminist theory about like
The way anyone responds to a pregnancy.
Yeah. For my thesis, like looking at all of the kind of different and competing ideas of like everything that's wrong with motherhood and all of the feminist issues with motherhood and all of these different kind of ideas about how we can solve it. And a lot of the like old school radical feminist theory is just very like, well, the only way to do it and to not be oppressed under patriarchy is to not have kids. And so I'm sitting there 23 and heavily pregnant and like, what? Like, what? That's not, no, what? What do I do? And the other thing is that part of that research, I did a survey of women across the country, asking them about like, half of the survey was like, how do you feel about the media's treatment of mothers? And what's your kind of like general feeling about mothers? And then the second half was like specifically about what people thought about Jacinda Ardern. But in that first half, before I found out I was pregnant, I designed the survey to be like, what do you think makes a good mother? And then what do you think makes a bad mother? And I just remember sitting there, like, again, heavily pregnant, having to like code and go through these survey responses. And people were literally like, you need to be over 25. Multiple people specified over 25 as the age, the appropriate age to become a mother. So like you had to be over 25, have finished studying, have no history of like, not no history, but not have mental health issues, be married, financially stable, like all of these things. And I was just like counting on my fingers, like I'm none of these things.
You were like, tick, 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 tick.
Like what do I do? So also really beautiful, also really fantastic to be studying something as you're going through it.
Yeah.
But also, very overwhelming at the same time.
I can't even imagine how your brain must have been coming to terms with everything.
Just so overloaded. So I really hate being pregnant. I'm really miserable when I'm pregnant.
Me too.
So I started my master's thesis at the start of 2019. And was pregnant in September. I'd already taken like a mental health break reasonably early on for a couple of months. Before I got pregnant, and then I got pregnant and I was just out for the count for like the first 3-4 months, and then even after that pretty out for the count. But we kind of started setting up our house in Dunedin and getting all ready for our baby, and then it was March 2020. So
I was gonna say, if Ginny's just about to turn 5, man, your timing was awful.
She's a lockdown baby.
Charlotte.
So ended up, my partner was a dairy farmer at the time, so we were out on the farm. So it was actually really lovely because we were like completely isolated and could walk around the mountains. And
that is quite nice.
I wasn't walking around the mountains, but walking down the road and the mountains were around us. And my little sister was actually in her first year at her hall at the uni. And so she came to live with us over lockdown too.
That's so
I actually look back on it like quite happily. Like it was a really nice little time, but still heavily pregnant, trying to do my master's thesis, so much anxiety about having a baby in the pandemic.
And then a world pandemic just to like
just to
add
top
into
it off.
the mix.
So didn't finish my thesis before Imogen was born. So she was born in June, and then I went back to my thesis full time, but from home. So trying to work with when she was 3 months. So working full time on a thesis with a baby who would only sleep on my body. She was not a put down baby. And I remember,
I genuinely do not know. I did it with a 1-year-old and not even a master's, like a dip. And I do not know how you would have done it with, I don't know.
It's just pure haze. Like, I just don't know. My mother-in-law came down for big stints of it and would like be in the next room with Imogen, because she was also just like attached to my boob 24/7. Like I could not leave her for more than 45 minutes. She would just scream. I had to physically be in the house. And she was either there or she was in the jolly jumper. So I was like trying to type and write my thesis while she's just like bouncing up and down in the doorway next to me, like, hi mom. So I submitted in December 2020. So she was 6 months old when I submitted.
That is amazing.
And then I graduated and had the grade to get my PhD scholarship. But I actually took until October. I just did lots of like tutoring at the university and worked in our department and took a bit of a breather to decide exactly what I wanted to do for my PhD. So there was a bit of a break. And I officially enrolled in my PhD in October 2021. And that was also the month that I found out I was pregnant with Edie.
You're like, no more study ever, because the next time that happens, I'm finding out I'm pregnant.
Yeah, no, I'm like, I can't. I'm done now. Like, I'm going to have a crisis because I can't physically study anything else, like to a higher level.
You've
Yeah,
clocked
no,
it.
they're going to cut me off. My student loans cut me off, man. There's nothing else I
You've
can do.
clocked academics. That's wild.
But like, we actually plan to have Edie reasonably close together
Nice.
because I was like, I can't have a new baby and be in that final push of writing the thesis. Like, I absolutely refuse to ever do that again. And I knew if we waited until after the PhD, they'd have like quite a big age gap, which would have been fine. But I just preferred the idea of like closer rather than further apart.
That's the exact same. I want to do my master's, and that's almost the exact same thinking we've done with having Max now, rather than waiting till after my master's to have Max.
Yeah, absolutely. I just was like, and I also just, again, hate being pregnant so much that I was like, I'm actually, like, I know I really want another baby. But I did just kind of have this panic of like, if I don't just smash it, like, I just wanted it done. I just wanted to smash it out and have it done. I think that was also, I think I was actually quite heavily influenced by social media too, though, because it just feels like everyone was having 2 under 2 or like an exact 2-year age gap. So it just felt like that is what you do. Like, there were so many, I don't really follow any influencers anymore, but there were so many that I followed at the time that I think I was really engaged in who were all having second babies 2 under 2 or very close to that age gap. And it was
really
just like
interesting.
People, yeah. And I remember so clearly after Edie was born, like, 'cause I really struggled after she was born, and that age gap is 2 years and 6 weeks. And I remember just being like, but it's not 2 under 2, so it shouldn't be this hard. Like, I didn't have that badge. Like, I didn't have this weird like 2 under 2 badge that everybody else around me seemed to have. And so I thought that like I wasn't allowed to be like, a 2-year-old and a baby is still really hard. And now I look back on it, like Duncan and I, when Edie was the age, so around 1 is when we started trying, and we got pregnant pretty quickly with Edie. So I think Imogen must have been like 15 months-ish old when I found out I was pregnant. And from like that age, like Duncan and I would just look at each other and be like, Edie she's a baby, she's tiny. What the fuck were we doing having another baby? Like, what were we doing? How did we even have the like capacity to make another baby? Like, she's so tiny, she's so needy, she's so overwhelming, she's such a baby. But at the time I felt like Imogen was like quite grown up and like not a baby anymore.
I think with your first you just feel like they're huge, eh? You're like, this is such a grown-up child. I can Max is 5 months old, and I can remember Freddie at 5 months and being like, oh, he's such a grown-up. And Max, I look at her and I'm like, I just birthed you. Like, it's so strange.
It's like your second baby makes you realize how long they're actually so little for in a weird way. Like, I just remember being like, what were we doing? And again, I really don't want to like buy into that. Like, I'm really against this idea that like there's any perfect age gap. Or that like if you have them 3 or 4 or 5 years apart, or that there's some magic formula for if you have a baby at this time, it's going to be easy. Like, we could have had a 5-year age gap and I could have struggled just as much after my second baby was born.
Parenting is hard, man.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to come off as like, oh, I would never do a 2-year age gap again, or like scare anybody off that. Like, if there's reasons for you and your family to aim for a 2-year age gap or a 2 under 2 age gap, like, absolutely go for it. But I just look back on it as like chaos. But anyway, enrolled in my PhD the month we found out that I was pregnant with Edie. And so she's been with me on my whole PhD journey now. So my PhD is like literally as old as she is.
And quite close to finished, I say tentatively?
Yes, hopefully August. It was meant to be February this year. But I've just been slowly kind of pushing it out and out because of life. So it will have been 4 years since I started this October, but I did take 5 months parental leave. I was on deferral after Edie was born. So that doesn't count towards like how long I've actually been working on it technically. So
and can you give like a very brief, like layman's terms overview of what your PhD is? Because it is very interesting.
I feel like layman's terms is all I can do because I like overdo the like everybody should understand it to the point that then I'm using like no theoretical language. And my supervisor's like,
exactly. When I was studying, I was like, why do people not want me to understand what they're talking about? I don't get it.
I know. I find it really frustrating.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I wanted to kind of understand a bit, again, like a lot from my personal experience, the kind of transition that happens when you become a mum for the first time. So I designed all of my kind of research methods around that, and I'm was really, really heavily influenced by Anne Oakley, who is a sociologist who did a lot of work in the 1970s, very like foundational work in like motherhood as a sociological concept for the first time, because before then
Before the
people...
70s, it wasn't a sociological concept, so...
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It was just like, that's what women do. And it's a biological fact. It's not a sociological concept.
Yeah, there's actually no like brain or emotional change that happens, so
No,
it's fine.
absolutely not.
It didn't need to be studied.
And so she was the first to like actually talk to women and be like, I actually want to know what like first time mothers are experiencing and do all of this. And she
Revolution.
I
Bloody
know,
hell.
wild. And she really took the position of researcher as like not somebody who goes in and like picks apart and analyzes the shit out of what women are saying. She just really took women's stories for face value. So her book, From Here to Maternity, she inverts the sociologist participant relationship. And so in the book, most of the book is just transcript, like organized into sections. So it's all of the women's words. And she has this beautiful quote that I can't recall off the top of my head, but it's essentially just like, I realized as I was putting the research together that I like the women told their stories so much better than I ever could. So why would I try and tell their stories? And so she just put all of them into the book, and then her analysis, brief analysis at certain points, is in italics, which is how participant transcript would traditionally appear. So she like inverted that relationship and really centered women's stories. So I'm really heavily influenced by her. And she also spoke to first-time mums. But what I decided to do was serial interviews, so that I could kind of track the process of becoming a mother. So I first talked to participants late in their pregnancy, so kind of between 36, 38 weeks. And then I spoke to them again roughly 6 weeks after they gave birth. And then I spoke to them again kind of 12 to 18 weeks postpartum.
That is fascinating.
To really kind of try and get this like idea of like, what is it to like become a mother? And cat appearance.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I love
everyone
it.
else.
Oh, sorry, that's just immediately.
No, that's fine. Here she is. This is
Gorgeous.
Dottie.
Hello, Dottie.
Dorothy when she's in trouble.
Oh my God, she's gorgeous.
She is a very sweet girl. She is
I
a
love
nightmare when I'm recording, though. She just wants to be on me, and I'm like, you're going to purr into the microphone, Dottie.
That's okay. I've been distracted by her now, so I'll try and ignore her if she pops up again.
It's fine.
But where was my train of thought? So you really kind of track that becoming a mother. And my thesis has actually really ended up being not about what I thought it was going to be about, because I went into it like my honors dissertation was on media, like it was around media representations of young people's dating relationships. And then obviously I had quite a strong media focus on representations of Jacinda Ardern. And so I went in thinking that like the title of my thesis was going to be, you know, something around like how media was impacting the transition into first-time motherhood.
Yeah.
And that's how I advertised it, and that's what I thought that people were going to talk about heaps. I thought they were going to be like social media and movies and advertisements and all of these things. And I also used open-end questioning techniques, which means that I had like a rough guide of the questions that I was going to ask that the ethics committee cleared. But I was also allowed to just kind of let participants take it where they take it, much like your podcast, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah.
And so they like did talk about media. It was like an aspect, but like women also just like weren't really that interested in speaking too much about that. They'd just go on these tangents, like wanting to tell me, you know, what it was like having a really good midwife, or what it was like having a really hard relationship with their midwife, or how hard accessing support after a miscarriage was, or how hard it was financially that their paid parental leave was so low, or how scared they were already at having to go back after having their baby, you know, after a few months of work. And then they also just wanted to tell me like really beautiful stories about their lives and about their babies and about like what it felt like when their baby was put on their chest and they got to meet them for the first time. And so I was kind of like, oh shit, my thesis isn't actually about what I thought it was going to be about, because these women want to talk about so much more than just like, oh, mummy influences make me feel bad.
Yeah, social media makes me feel bad.
Yeah, which is like a big part of it, but it's just not the whole picture.
The whole thing.
So now I've kind of tentatively separated it into 3 sections, which I kind of argue we need to be looking at all 3 of these aspects from a feminist perspective in order to like truly understand the experience of new motherhood. So I had the constructed experience, which is like all of the media representation and whole kind of like construction of the ideal mother. And the impact that that has on participants. Then I had the structural experience of becoming a mother, which is all of the structural stuff, obviously. So like paid parental leave and welfare and engaging with the medical system and ECE and all of those kind of structural things. And then I have the individual experience, which is just full of all of the kind of like stories that women had to tell me about how all of these things impacted them and made them feel, and what their experience was in that really kind of like subjective way. So now I've got like all three. And I really think that like one section could be a thesis.
I was going to say, that
But I
sounds
somehow have to fit them all in.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a meeting with my supervisor the other day and I was like, I don't know if I can fit in the last section. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it because I'm already at 100,000 words. Anyway, that's it in a nutshell, I guess. And I'm still kind of, yes, you can be a few months out from submission and still be like, and I still need to decide exactly what the point is and exactly what I'm arguing.
That
But I'll
is
get
so
there.
amazing. That just sounds like I could honestly, I know it's not the point of this podcast, but I could literally talk to you about this for hours because that is just so up my street. I think that is so cool.
It's so great. I feel so lucky. Like, I genuinely think there's so few jobs that people have in life where you can genuinely say that, like, you wouldn't want to do anything else. And I felt that, like, pretty much since I started postgrad, like, from my honors year, like, I just love it. And really enjoyed my master's, but especially adore my PhD. And it really means so much to me, like, on a personal level as well. So, like, I think that's part of why it's so hard to let go of. But yeah, I often say to my partner, like, you know, the whole, like, what would you do if you won lotto conversation? And I'm like, I'd still just keep doing exactly what I'm doing.
And is that not like the ultimate goal?
It's the dream, like, it really is. And it is going to be a shock when, like, I submit, because, like, this is the only time probably in my academic life, if I continue to be an academic, where I get to just, like, focus so solely on something that I care so much about. Because, you know, as an academic, you need to teach, you need research grants, you need to kind of like expand your portfolio of things you look at. And I think that's going to have a challenge to it. And it's part of why the Instagram has become so important to me as well, because I'm starting to maybe see that as an avenue where I can kind of do part-time academic stuff. And potentially part-time, I don't know, figure out a way to continue to do research and like share information and research with other people. In order to like share it, I guess.
I feel like that, like, academics is so inaccessible for so many people. I feel like if you're not a professional academic, you almost feel like you've been left behind a bit in like understanding and navigating research studies, like even like updated evidence-based stuff. And so to have people like you who can decode it and like put it into terminology that is understandable and like put it into bite-sized pieces, that's like amazing, like so amazing.
I hope so. And I was actually literally just saying to my friend tonight, like, I'm so motivated to get the PhD done because, you know, there's so much happening in like politics at the moment, for example. And I don't like just putting stuff out there. Like, I'm fine to put my opinion out there, but I would prefer to do it in a way where I can also be like, and here's this study, and here's this study, and here's some evidence. And I just don't have the capacity to do that at the moment. And so I feel like I'm feeling really strongly about, like, I want to explain to people why this is bad and like why we all need to why we need to care, like, even when it feels like it doesn't impact us, like, why we need to care. But I just don't have the capacity to like make it into coherent thought, find my evidence, which I know exists, but I still need to find it and I still need to reference it
and like put it into,
and then also make it into bite-sized content.
Exactly.
So I'm really looking forward to being able to do more of that, hopefully down the track.
We need people like you. And I love, like, so here's a fun fact about me, is that I went to the University of Otago for 6 months, straight out of high school.
We didn't keep you. We didn't sell you on the dream. You got to winter and you were like, nah.
I didn't mind the cold. I just didn't know what I was doing with my life and partied way too hard and crashed out a little bit and was in a hall that was full of rape culture and very much an old boys club. It was not great stuff. But the one department that I just adored was gender studies, and was definitely, it was the only paper I finished from that semester because I loved it so much. And that's where I found out about social work, really, and about like how you can be a feminist social worker. That's probably where I started identifying as a feminist, and that's, I think, why I ended up becoming a social worker a year later. So I credit your department for spurring me on my feminist journey.
What year would that have been for you?
2015.
That was my first year in Dunedin. We probably crossed paths
Amazing.
on a drunken night out. We crossed
Truly.
paths.
Because I wasn't doing much else in Dunedin, I'll tell you
No,
that much for
no,
free.
neither was I, but I just managed to like fumble my way through, honestly. And this is the thing that I will also say to people who are considering academics, but are ever like, my transcript was so bad in undergrad, or like it wasn't good enough. I have like ranging from like fails because I just literally stopped going to class to like C minuses because I was like, I'm bored, I don't like the paper, to like A pluses
Yeah.
because I like adored the paper and focused so hard. And it's
That
what
is
I
my
put.
transcript. You can just tell which ones I cared
So
about because that's where I've done well, and the other ones I'm like
yeah,
barely scraping by.
yeah, and you can like what I did was I love gender studies, so I did well in gender studies. And so I had my B plus average to get into honors in gender studies because I had an A average in those papers. And you only need your 300 level papers from the subject that you are planning to do postgrad in.
I didn't know that.
So I scraped in through like just focusing on my one subject that I really liked.
Love
And then
that.
from honors, like because I could focus on what I wanted to focus on. And again, the department, like I credit our department with like everything that I have been able to achieve because yeah, I went and spoke to Chris Brickle as a little undergrad and he just like scooped me up and was like, okay, well, these are the papers that we can cross
We'll
credit and
figure
we'll
it
have you
out.
and we'll love you and all of these things. And I was
Yeah.
just like, this is where I belong.
Yeah.
One of my supervisors is Dr. Rebecca Stringer, who teaches Introduction to Feminist Theory.
Yes.
And that was the first paper, gender studies paper that I took at Otago, and I fell in love with it. And now she's one of my PhD supervisors. So
That
that's
is
like
so
such a
cool.
beautiful full circle moment. And then my other supervisor, who is like my primary supervisor, is Dr. Fairley Gilmore, and she is just fantastic. She'd recently moved to New Zealand when I went into honors, and I just kind of got put with her randomly. And she's just the best, like the most amazing supervisor in the world. I could not
So
ask for
good.
more. Like with me through honors and my masters and now my PhD. So we've been working together for like 7 years, almost 8 years.
And both your babies.
Both my babies. So she was so excited when I told her I was pregnant with Imogen. I was so scared. And she was just like, it's going to be great. It's going to be amazing.
Oh, that's what
It's
you
going to be
need.
fantastic. She had her daughter when she was, I think before she started her PhD, but she did her PhD with her daughter when she was a baby and a toddler. And so she was just like, absolutely, let's do it. Let's do it. And she's
And
always
that's
like,
why we need mums in spaces so other mums
absolutely.
can see that it can be done.
Absolutely. And she always says to me as well, she's like, you know, I get mums approach me for supervision for postgrad, and they worry that like they're not going to be able to commit the time, or they're like not going to be good enough, or they're not like smart enough. And she's just like, mums are like the best. Like they work so hard. They get like so much done so efficiently.
Oh my
and like
gosh.
they're fantastic to supervise. But yeah, she's always like, give me another PhD baby. Like just I want more PhD babies.
Pop one out.
But when we were in Dunedin, like when Imogen was born, obviously it was COVID, but like we also had like no friends. Like everybody had moved up to Wellington or Auckland. Everybody moved away from uni. My family's all in Wellington. Duncan's family's all scattered all over the place. Like it was just us.
Oh,
We
that's
really had no one,
hard.
and we did it all ourselves. And now we've like built a bit more of a community. But honestly, it was probably only like the last 2 years that I started to feel like I had like at least one really good friend. And I built it out kind of from there. Yeah, like Fairley, my supervisor, was like offering to take her own like annual leave and sick leave to come over when I was finishing my master's thesis to just like sit with Imogen while I typed.
That is what you
And
need. That's
whenever I have a
amazing.
baby, she comes over with cake and she just like adores my children. And it's just so like, it's just not an issue. Like it's just, yeah, we'll just deal with it.
It's the best.
Yeah, so just fantastic. Like I'm so lucky with.
And it's like, you know, it's what you'd hope for from a gender studies department, but also like you want, like I would hope someone would get that in like engineering or
Absolutely.
what, you know, like you hope that that's the standard everywhere, but it's just devastating that it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say, like, I do think, yes, we're a gender studies department, but I do think that it is like a particular culture at the Otago one that is incredibly supportive because, yes, gender studies, but also academics. Academics can still have, like, I don't know, universities are still like inherently patriarchal colonial institutions that are completely structured around like the idea still that like man goes to study, woman stays home, woman doesn't come to study, woman certainly doesn't have a baby.
Woman does not bring baby to study.
Woman does not bring baby to study.
Woman does not
So
breastfeed in library.
no. So yeah, like I think also the people that I work with are just also fantastic people,
Awesome.
and I'm very lucky to have stumbled into the department I did when I did at the stage of my life that I was, and
Yeah.
that yeah, they've let me stay so long.
Love that. They clearly like you. It's great. The good news is I feel like we've answered the first question, which is tell me about
I
your
think
journey to
so.
becoming a
I
parent. But
think
I feel
so.
like
Yes.
we know that now, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe just quickly, if you want to, tell me a little bit about the births in those early days. But
Absolutely. So Imogen pregnancy, hated it.
mm,
Miserable the whole way through. I think looking back, I probably had like a mild form of HG. Like I just think I must have. I remember in both pregnancies being like, this just isn't normal. And I did go to the hospital for fluids when I
sounds
just
pretty.
couldn't
I had
stop
HG with
vomiting.
Max, and it sounds pretty
Yeah,
HG-ish to me.
and the hospital did mention that they felt that that's what I had, but it was also my first baby, and I just didn't like, I couldn't even remember the term, I was just like,
Yeah.
what? And then nobody really mentioned it again.
Yeah.
And it was only after I had Eddie, and I was like, nah, that was fucked. That's not
That
normal. And like
sucked.
I was also the first of my friends to have a baby. One of my best friends from high school is pregnant at the moment, and I am like so excited because it's the first of my like really, really, really close friends to have a baby, and I'm just like, it's
Yay.
happening, it's finally happening.
You're like, oh, my friends are joining me. Yeah.
So I just didn't have any reference point really even for other people being pregnant and
Yeah.
feeling that way. But I think again through like social media and talking to other mums and mums who were diagnosed with it being like, oh, I think that is what I had, albeit like I know that's it's also something hard to like self-diagnose yourself with because like I was so miserable and so sick for 9 months, but you still always look at the people who have like that severe
Yeah,
HG,
who need
right?
like the
And they
PIC
like,
line and
yeah, and
yeah.
they just can't eat and they're so sick and they're bedridden and they're in hospital and they're losing all of this weight. And that
Yeah.
wasn't me. So it makes me go like, oh no, I must have been fine, but I wasn't fine. It was awful. And yeah, my birth with Imogen, again, like lockdown, I just like, I don't know, my mum, I was at the birth of my first niece. So my older sister had her first
Mm,
baby in 2016, and I was at the birth, and it was like the most amazing thing. And my
amazing.
sister did it like she was induced and then gave birth with like no other medical intervention or drugs or anything like that.
Mhm.
And I just remember being like in awe of her and like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then I also knew that my mum had 4 children with no pain relief epidural or anything like that. So I just had it
Woof.
in my head that I would also do the same. And so I was kind of like, I want to do all the hypnobirthing, all the everything. And then COVID happened, and I was coming into my third trimester, I think, when we went into lockdown. And I just remember being so anxious that like Duncan wasn't going to be able to be with me at the hospital.
Mm.
And I was also terrified to have her at home. And I was so scared that somebody was going to try and make me have a home birth or that like I wouldn't be able to go to the
That would be
hospital.
the rules. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that I wouldn't be allowed to go to the hospital. I had this incredible midwife who was like, honey, that is not going to happen. Like, you are going to the hospital, it's
Yeah.
fine. But I was just so scared. And I was scared that if I did go to the hospital, Duncan wouldn't be allowed in.
Yeah,
And
and
I
also
just,
like I've had a few people come on with COVID babies and everyone's mentioned like just how scary it was that the rules were just changing every day. Like
yeah, and there
that is
was
so
no,
stressful.
the thing that still makes me so angry is that pregnant people were told, like, they were essentially told colloquially, like, you are high risk, we need to keep you safe, all of these things. But then we were in, like, none of the regulations for, like, having
Mm,
vaccines first, or here's some, like, special information for you, or, like, here are the protocols for you, or here is your exemption to not have to go in to work and be an essential
yeah.
worker. I remember when I was pregnant with Edie, sorry, jumping, but just sticking with COVID, like,
Mm.
I was teaching at the university and everything was over Zoom. And then we went back into in-person teaching and I was like heavily pregnant, like about to go on maternity leave. And there were currently studies that I was reading about how like exposure to COVID during pregnancy can impact the placenta and like all of these things and
Mm.
all of these unknowns. And then being told, like knowing that and knowing that you're a higher risk, and then being told that you have to go back to in-person teaching because you're not on the you're not on the medical list of people who are exempt, and just being like, what? Like, why?
I worked in a primary school at the time and I had the exact same situation, went back at 8 months pregnant and was just
Yeah.
like terrified that I
And
was going to catch
again,
COVID. And
I was just so lucky because, again, my supervisor came to my rescue and was just like, we're not doing that. You're continuing to teach on Zoom. Like,
oh,
that's just not
good.
happening. Like, it's
Yeah.
just, and again, the department just got behind it and we're just like, nah. like, we're not doing this. Like, if anybody has a problem with it, like, just no. So again, I
So
was
good.
really lucky. But yeah, so COVID, and I just shut down with Imogen. I just refused to think about birth. I remember
Yeah.
at like 37, my midwife had tried to bring it up a couple of times, and I was just like, oh, we'll just go with it. We'll just roll with it. Because I just couldn't go there in my brain because because I knew that anything could change,
Yeah.
and that nothing was for certain. So what was the point of making a plan? And I just refused to go there. And at around 37 weeks, she was like, we do have to talk about it. Like, we do have to talk about what you want
You're
and
like,
what your
she'll
preferences
just come out
are.
and it'll be fine.
Yeah. And I wasn't like scared of giving birth. I was scared of the circumstances around giving birth. And I was just kind of like, oh, we'll aim for no epidural, but also like, we'll do whatever needs to be done. My absolute like worst case is a C-section. Like, I'm really scared of a C-section. So anything to avoid that. But yeah, we went into it. It was just so much more intense than I could have ever expected. Got to the hospital. I was just like only 2 centimeters, just couldn't progress. I'd been in labor for 30 hours, I think, and hadn't gotten
Charlotte.
past 2 centimeters and was just screaming and vomiting and losing my shit. So they gave me some morphine, and by that point I was just gone. I was like, yeah, do whatever. Gave me some morphine. Morphine wore off after like 45 minutes. I was back to like screaming, crying, everything. We got the epidural in, and I was just like a new person. Duncan was like, it was like you just came back immediately. Once you had the epidural. They gave me the epidural at like 2.5 centimeters because they were like, she needs something.
Yeah.
I found out after that they were all like, this is a C-section, like this is where it's
Interesting.
going, because yeah, like all of the factors. And my midwife just stood, like, she was pregnant herself at the time, and I just remember we arrived at the hospital at 7 a.m. and she just didn't leave the room. Like, she was just, I think, guarding my space quite a bit.
Bless her.
But I had the epidural, and after 45 minutes of the epidural, I was fully dilated. So I just needed the rest. I think that my epidural story is very like this is how they're meant to work. You know what I mean? Like, this is an example of them being like a really helpful tool that people need. And yeah, fully dilated. And then I pushed her out in 3 contractions.
So good.
So that was fantastic. I had really bad prenatal anxiety with both the girls. It was really awful. Like, I was just convinced that they were both going to die when I was pregnant. Like, it was awful. And again, I had a lot of midwife support through that. But the second Imogen was born, that was just gone. Like, I was just like, I can see her, I can touch her, I can see that she's okay.
Yeah.
And if she's not, I will take her to a doctor. So I found postpartum, like, I had stitches, and I found the recovery quite hard physically, but like mentally I was really good. As easy as like having a new baby can ever be, I guess, like mentally, because obviously there was still all of the sleep stuff and all of the everything, but I feel like I adjusted to it really well, and I really, really loved it. So yeah, pretty cruisy. She was a tough baby. She was.
I was gonna say a koala baby.
Tough koala baby, but yeah, it was fine because she was my first baby, so she had all of my attention.
Yes.
And then, yeah, with Edie, we went complete opposite direction. And I actually decided to have her at home because I was very nervous about leaving Imogen. I had like a lot of separation anxiety with her. And I just said to Duncan, I was like, I just feel like I'm going to be in labor and I'm going to refuse to get in the car. And like, I don't necessarily want to give birth at home, but I just feel like I'm going to refuse to go anywhere. We decided, my midwife was like, it's a lot easier to plan for a home birth and then go to the hospital if you decide you want to do that. It's a lot harder for me if I had Duncan on the phone being like, she's refusing to leave the house. Yeah. And then I have to do like an emergency home birth. Yeah. So we did that. She was born at home in the water, started having contractions, and was like, oh, these aren't sore enough to, like, I'm not having a baby. And I also had stop-start for like 2 weeks leading up to both my babies being born. So I was like, no, she's tricking me. She's tricking me. And I was only 39 weeks. It was on 39 weeks that she was born. And I remember our friend Peyton came over, who was at the birth. We put Imogen to bed at like 6:30, and Duncan was like, I think we need to call the midwife. And I was like, oh, okay, if we have to. And she kind of listened to me have a contraction. She was like, I'm in the car and I'm coming. And I just remember sitting in the pool, both the midwives there. And I was just so fine in between contractions this time that I was like, there's no way that I'm having a baby. And I just remember sitting there and like apologizing to everyone because there's like this crew of people, and I was like, I'm so sorry, you're gonna be here. You're gonna be here all night. And then she was born like 45 minutes later.
Amazing.
Yeah, she just like the whole labor was great. Pushing a baby out without an epidural, like, fuck that. Like, it was fine. It was only like 20 minutes of pushing, but I want another baby. And I never want to push another baby out without an epidural. So I was like, I might switch back again. I might be like, right, we're going back to the hospital again. We're getting an epidural. So I'm such a big advocate. I'm such a big advocate for, like, I had 2 polar opposite births. and they were just as valuable as each other, and like they were both fantastic and like fine, and there's no moral value
It
in
is so
either one.
weird,
Like,
the moral value
yeah.
that people place on natural births. I had 2 unmedicated births, not by choice, just because I labor really fast. And the amount of, and if I had a choice, I would have taken the epidural in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And the amount of people who say to me, like, you're amazing, you're a superwoman. I'm like, any person who has grown a human inside them and then the human is then external to their body, I don't care how they've done that. That is amazing. Like, I do not care the method in which that happened.
And it was actually crazy because I followed a lot of like natural birth, and I'm saying that in inverted commas for people who are listening, in quotations, natural birth, and like home birth pages, leading up to Edie's birth because I was planning for a home birth. And then after I had her, like I actually unfollowed a lot of them because I was like, I want no part of this. Like I want no part of, some of it is fantastic. It's great information. There are lovely, passionate people in that space. There's also people who I was like, I don't want to be affiliated with you in any way. And I still worry that people like think that I'm going to try and like convince them to have a home birth. And it's like, I would never even suggest it to somebody unless they came to me and they were like, I'm thinking about options. What was your experience? Like I would just never be like, because I just think people should give birth where they feel the most safe. And both times I gave birth where I felt the most safe. And it was a great experience. And both times I had fantastic midwives who listened to me and advocated for me. And I knew exactly what was happening at each step of the way. And so it was fantastic. And that can be true however you give birth. Like I really, really believe that. Yeah, it's just like, I think it's wild, these like moral values that people place on
actually bizarre.
How they give birth. And then after I gave birth to Imogen and I had an epidural, I felt so disappointed. And I remember talking to my mum and being like, you managed to do it without an epidural. And she was like, honey, I was just scared of the needle. I didn't do it because I thought it was like better. I was just terrified of that needle going into my back. I was so scared that I was like, nah, I will do it this way. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. I thought that it was like a big, like moral, important decision you made. Like that's how I built it up in my own head. And it's just not how you felt about it at all. It was just like, I didn't want the needle in my back.
My like initial birth plan, I in both of my birth plans, I was like, oh yeah, I'll go unmedicated because I know I don't like the feeling of being out of control. I don't like being on drugs. I don't like drinking very much because I just don't like being not in control of my body. And so I thought that in labor I'd want to like feel everything to know where I was in my body. And then when I was in labor, I was like, absolutely not, give me the epidural, which
absolutely not
didn't end up happening. But you know, like I thought that would be my case.
Yeah. And my home birth was like one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Like that birth was like cannot be topped. It was incredible. I felt amazing afterwards. Like it was just like magic. Like it was one of those like, I feel like such a dickhead, but like one of those like magical births that I was so like, glad. Oh my God. But I would never be like, so to have what I have, you also need to do it exactly how I did it. Because I just think that that's, so it was also the benefit of it was my second baby. And I had that like benefit of kind of knowing myself and how I behave in those situations and like what I needed, which you never know going into it for the first time. It
is crazy how different the second time feels than the first. My second labor, first labor was so fast that we almost didn't make it to hospital, and then second labor I was like, oh yeah, I know, it's ridiculous. And then second labor was about half that length again, and I was like, it was so easy that I was like, oh no, I'm ages away. And so we were like, you know, lumbering to the car and like just chilling, and we got into hospital. Like my husband went and like parked the car and like wandered back to the hospital, and then Max was born like 4 pushes after he walked into the hospital. And I was like, I didn't even know. I'm so sorry, because it just felt so much easier, and I don't know how it happened. It was bizarre.
I know, it's crazy. I think I would have been like that if we drove to like took the time to drive to the hospital, because the other thing as well is we were 45 minutes out, like we were out on the farm, so I was like, I just can't sit in a fucking car for 45 minutes.
That's a nightmare.
In labor again, I hated it so much the first time.
No, sitting, I was saying this the other day, the worst part of being in labor both times was sitting in the car having contractions. That's the hardest part of labor.
No, it's awful. It's the worst.
All right, we will move on to the second question, which is, what does successful parenting look like or mean to you?
I think that's such a hard one because, like, I just think it can vary so much. And I do tend to think that, like, most parents are successful parents in, like, some way if they're trying their best, you know?
Agreed.
So I don't think there's any like perfect way to do it. I think for me, something that I've had to like grapple with is that I'm not going to do everything right. And there's some things that I'm going to be able to change and nail and do really well. And that there's some things that I'm not. Like, I think that there's a really big push, again, particularly on social media, to be like, we need to heal all of the traumas of our past and our childhood and generations before us. And we need to address every single thing that has like psychologically harmed children from their parents. Like, this generation, we need to do it all. And I just think that that's not possible. Like, I just think that there are things that my children are going to look back on in their childhood and be like, I wish mum didn't do that. Like, I wish that that wasn't a boundary she drew. I wish that wasn't a decision she made. I didn't like this situation. Like, there's going to be things. Like, I can't nail it 100%. And knowing that, so my goal, rather than like nailing it, is having the relationship that when they're older, my kids can come to me and be like, hey, this was really hard that you did this or acted in this way or made this decision, and that I can hopefully listen and either explain to them my reasoning or be like, I'm sorry that I got that wrong, and to just do more than the generation before. So I think it's like, if the example, if like, let's say, for example, and I'm making this up, I'm not calling out my family, but let's say my mother had, you know, parents who like physically disciplined her and didn't give her a very good education or didn't support her education and were super fat phobic and body shamey, and all of those things. And then for me, she managed to be like, not physically discipline me, and really support education and like independence for young women and all of that, but still pass down, you know, some of the body stuff. I don't want to look at that and be like, well, you failed, mum, because you didn't do everything. I just want to go, okay, so now I'm going to pick off where she left off and try and make sure that I don't pass on, say, like the body stuff to my daughters. And that's something that like I've identified, but I'm sure that there will be something that they pick up that they're like, mum managed to do this, this, and this, and this, but she still passed down this. And so now I don't want to pass that down to my children or the children who are in my life when I'm an adult. And so I just think it's like this continuous cycle that we're all just kind of like doing our best. And as long as we're trying to address something, like, we're doing enough, you know?
And also there's always like going to be new things that come up with like the progression of technology and the climate, and like there's things we don't even know that we're doing wrong right now.
Yeah, my kids are probably going to be like, you're on your phone too much. And I'm going to have to be like, I'm sorry.
100%.
I was really addicted to my phone. Just like generations before were like, yes, I was always outside taking a 10-minute break smoking and ignoring you because I was fully addicted to cigarettes.
Yeah.
So like there's just always going to be something. And I just think there's so much social media at the moment that is just like, you can't call your daughter pretty and you can't say no and you can't do this, because everything you do is going to psychologically damage your child in like an irreparable way. And it's just so overwhelming. And I just think that people should take the stuff that really resonates with them and feels like really important to like their experience and their morals and what they want to pass down to their children. And you can just leave the rest. Like, I have people that I follow on Instagram who I adore and like fully respect their qualifications and their experience and the fact that they're giving advice based on evidence. And I can still sometimes look at that advice, you know, having taken 90% of the advice that they've given on social media and incorporated it into my life, I can still look at some advice and be like, not for me. Like in our house, we call treats, like food wise. Like, I felt so guilty about that for so long because I was like, oh, we're not meant to do that because it's body stuff and it's all of this.
Putting moral value on food.
Yeah. And I totally understand that argument. I totally get it. But just like the way we talk about food in our house, I think that we can balance the fact that we use treats. It's like in a sweet, loving way. My children have 24/7 access to treats. They have unlimited treats.
Yeah.
But they're treats because they're things that like, they're treats in the way that like, they make us happy and they make us feel like, oh, this is good. I feel like a treat. I'm going to have a treat. And so I'm like gotten to the place in my parenting where I can look at things like that and be like, I get the advice. I think it's really valid. I really respect this person, but I'm going to leave it on this occasion and maybe I'll revisit it later. But you just don't have to be doing everything 24/7, even if there is like sometimes, you know, like good research behind it and good, like, you know, like it's take what is important to you and incorporate that into your parenting and leave the rest and try not to feel guilty about it. I think is like gold standard.
So good. I love that. I love that so much. I was saying, I interviewed someone yesterday and I was saying to them that I found myself, and I'm caught myself doing it now, so I'm getting much better at it. But for a long time, I would scroll through all these parenting pages and I would just see like the grid post with like the headline or like the viral thing that's going to capture your attention. So like, don't say be careful to your child when they're engaging in risk-taking behavior. But then I would never read the caption, or I would so I would see the thing and be like, okay, I won't say be careful to my son when he's doing something risky. And then I actually wouldn't look at the reasoning, the evidence, like any of that, because I'd just keep scrolling. And so I'd take the like fear-mongering thing on board and it would be rattling around in my brain, but I actually didn't have enough information to know whether it was something I wanted to take on in my parenting or not.
Yeah.
And so I think there's like so much benefit in being like, if something is catching your eye and you're going, I wonder why that is, or is that something I want to implement, to like look at the person who's posting its qualifications and like who they are and what they know and what evidence they have for what they're posting. Obviously anecdotal evidence is great, but needs to be taken with a grain of salt because they're not you. And like, so if they're trying to say that this is like a one size fits all thing, like how do they know that? Or like, what evidence do they have for that? And I think that has changed things so much for me when I'm scrolling.
Yeah. And there is just no one size fits all. Like there's just not. Like everybody is different. Every child is different. Every family's values and priorities and everything is different. Like anybody who's telling you like this is the definitive thing to do, you should be wary of,
wrong.
I think.
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah, because even if it works for 99% of children or 99% of families, there's always going to be that 1% that it doesn't work for. So yeah, I think that would be my gold standard parenting.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Why Do You Parent Like That? Why Do You Parent Like That is a podcast created and hosted by me, Abby Harrison. A big shout out to my nephew Thomas and my niece Frances for lending their voices to my jingle, and to everyone who is helping me with their expertise on podcasting while I figure this out. Any resources mentioned in today's pod will be linked in the show notes alongside our sponsors. Please follow Why Do You Parent Like That on your podcast platform of choice, and follow us on our TikTok and Instagram at Why Do You Parent Like That podcast for more behind the scenes and reveals of upcoming guests. If you have a story you think would be great to share, please send me an email at whydoyouparentlikeThatpodcast@gmail.com. Love you. Say it back.
Why do you parent